2026. Today again we will be discussing some important topics that has appeared in today's The Hindu and the Indian Express newspapers which are relevant for your examination. In the initial two topics, we have included two mains practice questions which will be useful for your upcoming mains examination. So in the analysis section, in our first topic, we'll try to understand the possible implications of recent US court judgment with regard to the tariffs that were imposed by US administration. Then in our second topic, we will look into various aspects of left-wing extremism in India. Thereafter, keeping in mind the upcoming prelims examination 2026, we will discuss 5 important prelims pointers that will be highly useful for your preparation. So stay tuned. So let's start our discussion with the first topic, and the context of this topic is that the US Supreme Court struck down on Friday the President Donald Trump's sweeping powers that he pursued under a law that is meant for use in the case of the national emergencies. And this is related to GS Paper 2, Effect of Policies and Politics of Countries on India's Interests. And this is also related to syllabus of your GS Paper 3, Growth and Development. So the US Supreme Court has struck down the President Donald Trump's sweeping reciprocal tariffs that he imposed after the Liberation Day in April 2025. And the reasoning that was given is that US is having the trade deficit with various countries. Also, he alleged that other countries are not opening up their markets for the United States, and that is the reason these tariffs are imposed. Also, there were various penalties that were announced on different countries, and India was also one of the countries. And that penalty was because of the fact because countries like India were buying Russian oil, which were available at cheap prices, especially after the Russia-Ukraine war started. So the ruling that was given by the US Supreme Court, that is authored by the conservative Chief Justice John Roberts. The justices upheld the lower court's finding that Trump has exceeded his legal authority by invoking the 1977 law to impose sweeping powers. This 1977 law is International Emergency Economic Powers Act, or IEEPA Act of 1977. And the major feature of this act is that the major aim why this act came is to deal with the unusual or extraordinary threat to the United States economic, national security, foreign policy, or any other important aspects that is impacting the overall policy. And that is all the reason that is impacting, that is originating outside the US. And this actually gives the powers to the president to block or freeze the foreign assets, to impose economic sanction, to restrict foreign exchange dealings, also to regulate or prohibit trade and financial transactions. And also, United States, after all, is not at war with every nation in the world, and the government instead relies exclusively on this IEEPA, that is International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977. It reads the words regulate and importation to effect the sweeping delegation of Congress powers to set tariff policy, authorizing the president to impose tariffs of unlimited amount and duration on any product from any country. That this is not the only domain of the US president to impose such kind of wide range of tariffs. Rather, it should come from the Congress, which is the Parliament of the United States. Also, this is the first case that is marked by the wide-ranging policy agenda of the current president of United States. So here, what they are saying that the tariffs that is imposed under the International Emergency Economic Powers Act of 1977 during the peacetime is unconstitutional. This should be used in the case of the national emergency, where there is an extraordinary threat to the US national security, foreign policy, or economy that is originating outside the United States. Also, the court said that president cannot impose unlimited tariffs without clear congressional approval, without the approval of the legislative bodies. What is the constitutional basis? Article 1, Section 8 of the US Constitution says that the Congress alone can lay and collect taxes, duties, impose, and exercises. So that is the reason these tariffs that are being announced by the US administration or by the President of the United States, that is unconstitutional. That announcement or the levy of those tariffs should come from the Congress itself or the Parliament of the United States. They should actually give support to such kind of tariffs. Also, executive cannot assume taxing powers without the explicit delegation, and when there is no as such explicit delegation that is provided by the Constitution, so obviously this should be from the Congress itself. Now, there is a major questions doctrine that has been invoked, that has been used, that says that Congress cannot delegate vast economic powers through the vague language, and this International Emergency Economic Powers Act never intended for the sweeping tariff policy, and court called it a transformative expansion of the executive power, which is not allowed by the Constitution, which is unconstitutional. If you try to draw the parallels from India itself, separation of power, that is also part of the Indian Constitution. For example, it is part of the directive principle of state policies also. And in various judgments by the Supreme Court, we do get an idea, we do talk about the separation of power, whether implicitly or explicitly. For example, in Keswanand Bharti versus State of Kerala, Here again, the Supreme Court of India, Honorable Supreme Court of India said that the legislature controls the taxation. It is a parliament that controls the taxation, and executive must act within the statute. The rule-making powers or taxing powers, changes in taxing, etc., is by the legislature. Also, there is this occupied field doctrine that says that executive cannot override or amend the statutory provisions via the orders. Okay? And they can only supplement a statute if not inconsistent. Okay? That shows that you cannot come with a new tax altogether. Rather, whatever the orders that are there or whatever has been passed by the parliament, you should support that with some small changes. India's judicial approach was in R.K. Garg versus Union of India and Balco Employees Union versus Union of India case, that the Supreme Court says that judicial restraint is an economic policy. They cannot guide the overall economic policy of the government, how compensation or social security benefits should be provided to the workers or other people. Economic policy is the domain of the executive itself. Also, demonetization that was done in 2016, which shows that the old notes of 500 and 1000 were declared that they are not part of the legal tender. So court also upheld that decision because court tries to avoid interfering in the economic policy in the Indian case or in the case of India, and that is the difference that we can see in the United States. Generally, the US Supreme Court do intervene, they do interfere, and accordingly they are also trying to guide the economic policy if that is violating the constitution. But in India, there has been a sound restraint that has been showed by the Supreme Court to not infringe into the overall economic domain. Also, Aadhaar Act 2013, that was validated post statutory backing, and that was actually done. The Aadhaar Act came under the money bill, that is one of the money bills. So government, the Supreme Court actually gave various recommendations that for what purposes, etc., that can be this Aadhaar can be used, but overall they haven't stuck down the overall Aadhaar Act. Okay? Then in this Keswar and the Bharti versus State of Kerala case that we were discussing, the court by a majority of 7-6 held that the parliament can amend any and every provision of the constitution subject to condition that such amendment does not violate the basic structure of the constitution. Okay? Then if you talk about the Indian versus Supreme Court, what is the difference between the two with regard to the powers, mechanism, constitution, articles, etc., whether they talk about them or not. So article 124 to 147 talks about the Supreme Court of India that is provided in the Constitution of India. The article 3rd of the US Constitution talks about the Supreme Court of the United States. Also, the Supreme Court of India was established on 26 January 1950. It started to function from this day. Whereas the Supreme Court of the United States was established in year 1789. If you talk about the composition of Indian Supreme Court, it consists of one Chief Justice of India plus up to 33 other judges. Maximum number that is allowed is 34. Parliament can increase this number. Also, Chief Justice plus 8 associate justices, total 9 is the strength of the Supreme Court of United States. Also, appointment process in the case of Supreme Court of India is that they are appointed by the President, and collegium system that actually represent, that actually help in appointment process, that who will be appointed as the judge of the Supreme Court. And in this collegium system, all the members are from judiciary itself, right? So that shows that there is a judicial primacy in the appointment process. Executive has low role in appointment process of the overall judges. Okay? Whereas in the case of Supreme Court of United States, they are nominated by the President, but they are also confirmed by the US Senate. So that shows that appointment process involved executive, plus that also involves the legislature while making the appointment process. Also, the maximum tenure or the age of the retirement or superannuation for the Supreme Court of India is 65 years of age, whereas in the Supreme Court of United States, they can be in the office till their life tenure, but they will have to maintain a good behavior. Also, in India, the judges of the Supreme Court of India can be removed by the process of the impeachment, okay? And that requires special majority of the houses. And then by Congress through impeachment, there also the impeachment process is available, with the help of which the removal of the judges can be done from their offices. In India, if you talk about the judicial system, there is a single integrated judiciary, Supreme Court, High Court and subordinate courts. Whereas in Supreme Court of United States, we are witnessing a dual courts, that there are federal courts and there are separate state courts in different states of the United States. If you talk about the original jurisdiction of both the courts in India, the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court is much more wider. For example, that covers center-state disputes, state-state dispute, interstate disputes, or for the enforcement of fundamental right that is provided under Article 32 of the Constitution. So we have the different domain where the Supreme Court of India says that this is our Constitution of India explicitly talks about that these are the original jurisdiction of the Supreme Court of India itself. Whereas in the Supreme Court of United States, their original jurisdiction is limited, and that is mainly involved. In the cases involving ambassadors, public ministers, and dispute between states. Okay? So this is something that you have to understand. So that here you can see that there are a lot of other important domains which cover the original jurisdiction of Supreme Court of India. Also, the appellate jurisdiction that covers constitutional, civil, criminal related cases. Okay? For example, if a case requires interpretation of constitution, then appeals can be filed in the Supreme Court of India. Then if there was a person who didn't get any conviction from the lower court, but death penalty was given by the High Court, in that case also the appeals can lie. In Supreme Court of United States, their jurisdiction is mainly appellate, and that is discretionary via the writ of certiorari. Certiorari is an order, or a writ of certiorari is an order that is issued by the High Court to a lower court, tribunal, or public authority, commanding them to send the record of a case for review to correct jurisdictional error, legal flaws, or breaches of natural justice. In simple, it acts as a supervisory mechanism, both preventing and curing illegal, arbitrary, and authorized actions. If you talk about the advisory jurisdiction of Supreme Court of India, that is provided under Article 143 of the Constitution, that President can seek opinion. For example, recently, Honorable President of India seek the opinion of the Supreme Court of India on the judgment that was given by the Supreme Court of India with regard to the state government of Tamil Nadu versus Governor of Tamil Nadu, in which Supreme Court said that there should be a timeline that should be followed by the different state governors with regard to the decisions that they have to take on the bills. But here, the President of India seeked opinion that whether any particular court, or especially the Supreme Court, has a jurisdiction to look into the constitutionality or give certain directions on bill itself, which is a draft legislation. Also, in Supreme Court of United States, we do not have any advisory jurisdiction. Also, if you talk about the judicial review, it includes the basic structure doctrine, whereas in the Supreme Court of United States, again, there is the judicial review that is available. In India, it is saying that yes, judicial review is there, that whatever the amendments that are being done, that should not infringe the basic structure of the Constitution, which are the core principle of the Constitution. And in United States, again, the judicial review is available, and that was established in Marbury versus Madison case of 1803. Also, the binding nature of the decisions, whatever the decision that is there by the Supreme Court of India, that is binding on all courts in India, that is said by Article 141 of the Constitution. Whereas in Supreme Court of United States, it is binding under the doctrine of stare decisis. That is, the stare decisis means to stand by the things that are already decided. That means it is a legal principle that courts follow previous judgment or the precedents while deciding the similar cases. But here, in the case of India, the Supreme Court of India can overturn their own decisions by a larger bench. For example, let's suppose there was a 5 judges bench that gave a particular judgment. So a longer bench can give any decision that can overturn this particular judgment which was given by the 5 judges bench. For example, they overturned the Golaknath judgment in the Keshwananda Bharati judgment. And PIL, public interest litigation, that is recognized and widely used in India, whereas in United States it is not formally recognized in the same manner that is in India. Now, what is the current status if you talk about the new moves that are being done by the United States, especially in the backdrop of the tariffs which were struck down by the court? First of all, they invoke the section 122 of the Trade Act, and under that, there can be a temporary tariff that can be announced by the executive in the United States, and that is what they have done. That they announced 15% flat tariff on all imports, and earlier that was 10%. And this is the maximum allowed under this provision, under the section 122 of the Trade Act. The executive can impose 15% flat tariff on all the imports, but again, this will be only valid for 150 days, after which the congressional approval is required. So as of now, current status is this. This is the announcement which has been done by the United States with regard to the tariffs that will be imposed. If you talk about the global impact that it is going to create, for example, lower tariffs now will be for India, China, Japan, South Korea, ASEAN countries, Brazil, Mexico, Canada. The high tariff countries will be Russia, UK, Australia, Saudi Arabia, UAE, Argentina, etc. The European Union and Scandinavian nations remain at earlier differential levels. This is a picture that how the new tariff compares the previous rates, that some of the countries like Russia, Australia, Chile, Argentina are going to face much more higher rate, whereas comparatively the India and China will get the new lower rate, and that is the cause of concern for India, because earlier the effective rate on the exports of China was much greater as compared to India. So Indian products were competitive at the global level as compared to Chinese product. But now if both are being subjected to same level of tariffs, in that case the competitiveness of the Chinese product will be much high, and that can diminish the overall export potential of the Indian products. If you talk about the India's tariff timeline, in August 2025 there was a 50% cumulative tariff in which we had the reciprocal tariffs, okay? And also there was a Russian oil penalty that was levied. After that this has been reduced to 25%, and also there was a planned reduction to 18% for the reciprocal tariffs. Reciprocal tariffs, that means that you are imposing a tariff, in lieu of that we are also imposing a tariff on you. So the US government was alleging, US administration was alleging that India was imposing a lot of tariffs on our products. So that is the reason, in response to that, in a reciprocal manner we are also imposing. Also with the International Emergency Economic Powers Act gone, now there can be a possible 15% flat rate at least till next 150 days. Earlier India marginally worse off than China, so but now they both will be facing 15% rate. So because of that India may lose relative advantage under the tariff. Okay. And what still applies, for example, section 232 under the national security, and under this the steel and aluminium will still be getting the 50% tariff, 25% tariff on certain auto components, because of which there is a consistent threat to the export and chances or possibility of reduced competitiveness of these products. Then section 301, that is for unfair trade practices, that these require investigation and reports, not that it can be levied in an arbitrary manner. So there also it requires investigation that will eat up a lot of resources and time for the investigation, but these are still available that can be applied. Also India's export structure to the United States. First of all, if you see the data of 2023-24, so the top 10 trade partners that are of India was having trade deficit with 9 countries, and we had only one country with which we had the trade surplus, and that country is the United States. So that is also one of the reasons, since we were having the trade surplus, because there are a lot of exports which were being done by the Indian exporters to the United States. As of now, 55% of export may revert to normal MFN tariffs or most favored nation tariffs. Most favored nation is one of the concept under the WTO, that if you are providing some facility to any one country, so that should be expanded or that should be extended to other countries also. Also 40% exports are exempted: smartphones, petroleum products, medicines, etc. they are exempted, and remaining subjects to the section 232 duties, that is for the national security. Now what are the strategic implication of it? First of all, the US tariff policy now is legally constrained, so that is a setback for the US administration. So that may lead to more chaos in the global world, that may lead to uncertainty, and that is the reason you are witnessing more volatility in the stock market, in the capital market. Also, the ruling does not bar Trump from introducing tariffs under the alternative statutory authorities. Although those laws impose stricter constraints on the scope and pace of such measures, senior administration officials have indicated their intention to preserve the broader tariff structure through other legal mechanisms that can test the constitutionality of the courts. Also, court's ruling came in response to the lawsuits filed by the companies impacted by the tariffs, along with 12 US states that are mostly led by the Democratic governors, challenging Trump's unprecedented decision to use the statute to import taxes on this own authority. What we have to understand, that whenever there is a high tariff that is imposed on the imports, so that also increases the cost of the product. In that case, several companies who are importing the products, or for the general public, this can create a consequence, this can create a problem, because now that product has become very, very costly. And if some alternative or substitute is not available, then people will be compelled to buy the problem, because now that product has become. Also, US negotiating leverage is reduced, because earlier the first thing was that whenever they were on the table for negotiating anything, the first thing was that, see, we are imposing a tariff and we can increase that. Or in future, if you are not going to follow what we are saying, we can further increase this tariff. But now, because Supreme Court of United States itself said that this is unconstitutional, their bargaining capacity has reduced significantly. Also, courts may renegotiate deals made under the tariff pressures. The countries may renegotiate deals made under tariff pressure. For example, there is an 18% tariff that has been finalized by India-United States interim deal. But But if there is a 15% tariff, which is under this particular section 122 of Trade Act, so that will compel other countries to ask for the renegotiation or redrawing of the trade deal between India and United States. Also, India-US trade deal negotiations that has been temporarily passed because there was a team that was going to visit to United States, but particularly in the backdrop of the stuck down that we have seen with regard to the tariffs, that team will reassess the overall situation, will look into the overall developments that is happening, and accordingly probably they will negotiate the overall trade deal. Also, that will create the overall global uncertainty that we are witnessing, that companies are hesitant to invest more in the company, they are hesitant to increase their overall production capabilities or increase the production of goods and services. And the reason for that is that they do not have any clear idea what will be the future consequences or what will be the future tariff structure. So tomorrow their overall production can jeopardize because they may lose a particular market because that might have imposed a very high tariff. So that is what is creating a global uncertainty, and that is one of the reasons we are witnessing so much of volatility in the capital market or the stock market. This is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. Moving towards our next topic, that is highest ranking Maoist leader surrendered. This is related to syllabus of your GS paper 3, left-wing extremism in India. Also, the context of this topic is that in an unprecedented blow to left-wing extremism, Thipri Tirupati alias Devuji, the 62-year-old highest ranking member of the banned outfit, the Communist Party of India Maoist, and this person has surrendered before the Telangana police as per the various media reports. Also, you would be already aware of the fact that Ministry of Home Affairs and Honorable Minister of Home Affairs has made a target to eliminate this left-wing extremism by 31st March 2026. So in line of that itself, security forces has killed various leaders of the Maoist or Naxalism in India. Along with that, several of them has surrendered also in front of the government. Now, if you see the data related to left-wing extremism in India, so as of the 3rd February 2026, based on the reply that was given in the parliament, that it says that the list of left-wing extremism affected districts has came down to 8 only, 1 being in Odisha, 1 being in Jharkhand, and 6 being in Chhattisgarh itself. So this particular number has now reduced to 8 only in year 2026, whereas it was 180 districts which were impacted by left-wing extremism in the year 2013. So this kind of graph can also made by you, or that you can use in the actual answers that you are writing in the mains examination. Small bar graph can be made in the right side of the page showing the number of districts which are impacted, and then you can also show the decline. Now, if we try to understand what is meaning of Naxalism in Indian context, so first of all, the term Naxalism is deriving its name from the Naxalbari village in West Bengal, and in that village initially it was a landlord-tenant issue that slowly and gradually culminated into a full-blown armed insurgency movement, and which grappled various other states like West Bengal, apart from West Bengal, the Odisha, Chhattisgarh, etc. And what is the objective of these Naxalites? Actually, they want to overthrow the government, and the reason why they want to do so is because of the fact that they consider that the current establishment and government is serving only the interest of elite class. They consider government as exploitative, oppressive, and they want to establish the state based on the communist principles, based on the whatever the principles that were given by the Mao. And mainly they attack in the economic infrastructure. There are various other activities that they do, for example, guerrilla warfare, attack on security forces, extortion, intimidation and extortion, etc. that is being done. And if you talk about the causes of the rise in the left-wing extremism, what are the major causes why we have witnessed consistent attack on the infrastructure, deaths of security forces related to left-wing extremism? First of all, if you see this data, there has been a consistent decline with regard to the number of deaths, incident and attack on economic infrastructure in last few years, especially this is the data from 2013 to 22. That is based on the reply that is given in the Ministry of Home Affairs that says that consistently there has been decline with regard to the deaths, attacks on economic infra. Now, what is the cause? The first important is Jal, Jangal and Jameen. That after the independence, there were various measures that were taken by the government to go for the land reforms, so that there can be redistribution that can be done. The society, the people who were not having the proper land, at least they can get some land based on which they can do at least bare minimum subsistence farming, or they can do bare minimum agriculture with the help of which they can fulfill their own needs. But for example, the land ceiling policy that was there, and under which the maximum holding that a person can actually hold, that was fixed by the government. But here also there are a lot of corruptions that we actually saw, that people have transferred their land to their relatives, their servants, etc. to evade land ceiling, and there was no action that was taken. There were several primitive peoples, poor people who could not get the land, so they felt cheated, they felt alienated, and that is one of the reasons they took up the arm. Also, encroachment and occupation of government and community lands. For example, there was a traditional relationship between primitive people and the forest. For example, they were dependent on the forest for their bare minimum needs of timber or the food, etc. But with various laws that came, for example, example, forest right, etc., that restricted the use of the forest resources by these primitive people. That further alienated them and they took up the arms. Also, disruption of age-old tribal-forest relationship that we were saying, that these tribes were actually understanding the needs of the forest and they were also using the resources from the forest in a sustainable manner. But for example, there has been restrictions of the use of the resources. Also, there has been various restrictions related to the mining activities that can be done in these areas, etc. Okay. Also, after the PISA Act came, there has been the increased role of Gram Sabha, etc., for the mine leasing, etc. But that also is not being done in an effective manner. The development deficit that is there, for example, the unemployment rate that is consistently very high, the poverty or even the basic resources, we are witnessing that they are these primitive people or the tribal population is not even getting the bare minimum resources. That is also impacting them. And that, if you see, this is the data from the NASA Socioeconomic Data and Application Center, mapping poverty, a decade of deprivation across Indian states. You can see the states like Madhya Pradesh, Chhattisgarh, Jharkhand, Odisha, West Bengal, etc., where we are witnessing a huge amount of poverty, a huge level of poverty. They are also the districts or the states where we are witnessing very high cases of the left-wing extremism. Historically, these were the hotbeds of the left-wing extremism in India. So that is what we have to understand, that there has been a consistent development deficits, there has been bureaucratic apathy, there has been lack of proper educational facilities, there has been improper health facilities, the unemployment was very high, the people were not having even the bare minimum employment resources, and that has alienated them. And that is also one of the reasons why they took up the arm. Also, social exclusion, for example, violation of human rights, that is time and again witnessed. If, for example, in without any proper intention, they have used the forest resources, or there has been various cases of violences, alleged violences by the security forces, or the violences that they are facing by for the allegations of giving information to the security forces. So that is also one of the cause. Abuse of dignity of life, that they do not have even basic bare minimum resources with the help of which they can consistently have a dignified life, which is also part of fundamental right provided under Part 3 of the Constitution and provided under Article 21 of the Constitution, that provides for right to dignified life and property. Also, disconnect with the mainstream society, that they are completely alienated from the rest of the world, that they don't understand that what is the needs of these tribal population. We are not able to understand that because we have very poor relations with them, we have very poor interactions with them, we are not understanding, we are not taking feedback from them. Also, discontent against government, when there is very high discontent that okay, government is not helping them in addressing the poverty, government is not helping them in addressing the unemployment, government is not helping in improving the health and educational indicators. So that is also alienating them. And you can also see the socio-economic fault line, the 69 districts that are illiterate, the 20% of poor and 1.12% of poor and 23.3% of the households who don't get 2 square meals. Again, here you can see the areas where we have such huge lack of basic necessities, poverty, illiteracy, etc. So that also makes them alienated and they take up the arms. The governance deficit, for example, the bureaucracy, which is incompetent, ill-trained and poorly motivated public persons that are there. Bureaucratic apathy that we witness, that if there is a scheme, people don't understand the needs of these primitive people. They are not motivated to provide them in an effective manner. Mismanagement and corruption that is there. Poor implementation of laws and schemes that are there. All this also creates a governance deficit and people take up the arms. What are the government initiatives which has been taken to address this particular issue of left-wing extremism in last 1 decade? For example, National Policy and Action Plan that came in 2015 that provided for multi-pronged strategy in the areas of security, development, ensuring rights and entitlements of the local communities, that whatever the basic rights are there, they are legally provided under Forest Right Act, PISA Act, etc. Scheme of modernization of police forces plus fortification of police station in affected districts, so that in case of any attacks, there is less loss or collateral damage that the security forces should face. Assistance to central agencies for left-wing extremism management schemes like Central Armed Police Forces, Commando Battalion for Resolute Action Cobra and Indian Air Force. Also, there has been a Samadhan strategy that government gave that provides for 8 pillars of fighting Maoism. S stand for smart leadership, A for aggressive strategy, M for motivation and training, A for actionable intelligence, D for dashboard-based key performance indicators or KPIs, that whether they are improving on education, health, etc. or not. Also, use technology, harness technology for taking actions based on the actionable intelligence that is being provided to them. Action plan for each theater, each area which is the hotbed of left-wing extremism. Also, no access to financing. We need to curb them effectively. And also here, especially the urban nationalism, which helps in the intimidation or which helps in an unnecessary false perception building, and that also helps in financing, etc. That also needs to be addressed. Then surrender come rehabilitation policy for nationalites in affected areas. That is again motivating the several people who have taken
taken arms earlier, that they leave the arm, and because of which they can now get the support from the government to reintegrate in the society in an effective manner. Also focusing on the infrastructure creation via additional central assistance scheme and road requirement plan scheme. Universal service obligation fund, that is supported scheme of mobile services to increase the mobile connectivity for building infrastructure, for building towers, etc. Then schemes like Roshni, skill development, aspirational to improve governance as well as provide skills. Okay. Also there has been schemes like Nai Roshni. There has been schemes like Pota Kevin for the educational improvement. ठीक है, छू लो आसमान, नन्हे परिंदे, तमन्ना scheme. Effectively implementing provisions of PISA Act 1996 on priority that provides more rights to the Gram Sabha. What should be done? What should be the way forward? First of all, there can be again targeted security operations, and that should be based on the actionable intelligence. And for that, there should be more collaboration and cooperation should be witnessed between the different state police forces as well as various other security forces. Also, rehabilitation and reintegration, that should be the possible. So, most important factor that whenever we any particular Naxalite who is giving up the arm, there should be focus on reintegrating them effectively in the overall society in an effective manner, and that will support the former extremists and bring back innocent individuals back so that they can live their normal lives. Also empowering local peace ambassadors that identify and support peacemakers, foster communication, and encourage the community involvement. Socio-economic development, for example, invest in infrastructure, jobs, education, and healthcare. That will also help in bringing them back in the overall society. Then winning hearts and minds of the people, VAM strategy, that we are not only limited on taking the security related measures, but we are also listening them properly. We are understanding their problems. We are also taking proper actions to address their grievances in an effective manner. Ecological and sustainable development, for example, focus on sustainable development and community development. Comprehensive approach, for example, we can combine security, development, and community initiatives that can actually help in further tackling the left-wing extremism in the districts where it is still left. Then the DNA approach, that can be also utilized, that you can write in various places in your answers. That first of all, we should have a dialogue, whether it is at formal or informal level. Then negotiations, that with the help of negotiations we can arrive at a mutually shared worldview that this is the path that we should choose, and then accordingly we should take the action, that is whether we developmental outcomes can come, growth opportunity provisions can be there, and whatever the outcome will be there, if it is not achieving the intended objectives, accordingly there can be course correction that can be done, and accordingly the further decisions or the actions that can be taken. This is the area that you can see that consistently from left-wing extremism there has been a lot of questions that has been asked in the mains examination, and this is a mains practice question that you people can write from this particular topic. Moving towards our prelims pointers section that we have introduced considering your upcoming prelims examination 2026. The topic is ALARA principle. The full form is as low as reasonably achievable, and that is the operational philosophy of radiation protection. Radiation is the energy that is traveling from one place to another. For example, heat from the sun that is warming your skin, radio waves that is used for Wi-Fi, or the X-rays that is used by the doctors. And this radiation can be non-harmful like light or radio waves, and it can be also harmful in high amounts. For example, too much X-ray or nuclear radiation that can impact the overall human health. And this is related to GS paper 2, effect of policies and politics of countries on India's interests, and this has appeared in today's The Hindu, page number 9. So the background is that linear no threshold or LNT model and ALARA principle, that they form the foundation of the global radiation protection, especially from the nuclear sources. And on 12 January, the US Department of Energy removed ALARA from its directives. That these directives were actually giving an idea about the time, distance, and shielding. For example, they minimize the time that is spent near the radiation source to only what it takes to get the job done. Distance, that maximize your distance from a radiation source as much as you can. The greater the distance, the lower the dose of the radiation that the person will be getting. Shielding, that is to put something between you and the radiation source, that will reduce the overall impact. Now this whatever the directives that are removed with regard to the ALARA principle, that actually marks a departure from the long-standing national and international radiation safety norms that was there to ensure that the overall human health remain at safe level. What is the LNT model or linear no threshold? That actually provides for the risk estimation framework with regard to the radiation that can happen and what will be its impact on the health, the possibility of causing cancer, etc. And this says that there is no safe threshold. Even low doses of ionizing radiation carry some cancer risk. Ionizing radiation is having the high energy, and it can remove the electron from atoms, and that is the reason it is called as ionizing. For example, alpha particle, beta particles, gamma rays, X-rays, they all are called as the ionizing examples of ionizing radiations, and it can actually damage the cells as well as DNA, and this can actually cause the cancer also. And also there is risk increases linearly with the dose that the person will be subjected to. The basis of radiation regulation worldwide, that this LNT model was being followed by other countries for regulating whatever the radiation and the dose will be there for for the worldwide. Also, this is followed by bodies like International Commission on Radiological Protection, UNSCER, WHO, etc., for making all the rules and regulations with regard to the ionizing radiation and cancer risk. Then ALARA principle, or what is ALARA principle? That stands for as low as reasonably achievable. That is the operational philosophy of radiation protection, and that actually balances the safety of humans, feasibility, cost, and societal needs, that how we can balance all these. And it also focuses on engineering controls, that what can be the tweaks in the designs that can be done so that the effective dose that a person might be subjected to remains at an optimal level or safe level. Administrative safeguards to ensure that there is proper rules and regulation that is there and that is being followed effectively. Then safety culture also, that how we can develop that. And the question is that why did the US eliminate ALARA? The Department of Energy, they are claiming that experience shows that nuclear innovation can continue without strict ALARA framing. But the critics are arguing that it is a politically motivated shift, and that is based on non-peer reviewed internal reports. It can also undermine worker safety and public trust. It can also create regulatory inconsistency with global standards, because other countries might have the stricter norms with regard to the dose, etc. Also, scientific debate is that there is no strong large-scale epidemiological evidence replacing the LNT model. Alternatives models are, for example, hormesis, that suggest low-dose radiation may be harmless or that can be at times beneficial. For example, that can be also used for the cancer treatment. It also lacks consistent human data, and also it is ethically difficult to validate what has been the impact. There has been some recent studies, for example, million person study and Nature Medicine study of 2023, that says that low dose linked to the blood cancers, and that is the reason this removal can also create some kind of future health related challenges, especially the cancer burden, etc., can increase. Moving towards our next topic, that is direct benefit transfer, or DBT, and PM Kisan. And the context is that why we are taking this topic, because there has been a network which is unearthed in Rajasthan who were diverting the funds or the cash from different government schemes, and this is related to GS paper 2, government policies and interventions. This is also related to syllabus of your GS paper 3, cybersecurity, and this has appeared in today's The Indian Express, page number 1. So direct benefit transfer, or DBT, which is more effective and possible with the help of JAM Trinity, that is Jan Dhan, Aadhaar, and mobile. Because with Jan Dhan there has been an account that was opened for everyone who were not having the account, so that ensured that whatever the transfers will be there, that will be in the designated bank account, because now the persons are having Aadhaar, that is ensuring the proper authentication that this is the same person who should be the intended beneficiary. And then with the help of mobile, there has been the updates, etc., that the person can get with regard to the credit of the different DBTs. The DBT that ensure faster and transparent transfer of benefits directly to the beneficiaries, because earlier the issue was that when we were giving the benefits in cash, there has been the losses that were being reported at every stages because of the inherent corruption that was involved. And DBT has helped in reducing the leakages, duplication, and fraud in the government delivery systems, that it has tried to address the majority of the inclusion and exclusion errors that are there. It was launched on 1st January 2013 by the Government of India as a governance reform initiative, that how citizens are getting their services. So with DBT, it has become much more efficient, that on the day of the launch or on the day of the processing itself, the people are getting their whatever the benefits are there. Also, the implementation platform is that it is rooted through Public Financial Management System, PMFS, that is under the Controller General of Accounts, and it acts as a common digital payments and monitoring platform, that whether benefits are being properly given to the beneficiaries or not. The major components under DBT is that beneficiary account validation system, integrated payment and reconciliation system that is linked with the RBI settlement system, NPCI, which is providing the Aadhaar payment bridge. Public and private banks, regional rural banks, cooperative banks are there, which is providing core banking solutions, with the help of which the transfer, etc., is also becoming much more easy. There are more than 310 schemes across 53 ministries where we are using the DBT. Major schemes under which we are taking the benefits are PM Fasal Bima Yojana, Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi, PM Krishi Sinchai Yojana, National Food Security Mission, National Food Security Act 2013, Atal Pension Yojana, National Ayush Mission, etc. Aadhaar is not mandatory, especially after the Supreme Court judgment, and also, but it is a preferred medium for accurate beneficiary targeting. If you see this data from 2013-14 to 24-25, every rupee is reaching the citizen. There has been more than 90 times rise in DBT transfer in just a decade. It was 7,368 crore in 2013-14. It increased to 6,83,000 crore in year, 6,83,000 crore in 24-25. Also, around 44 lakh crore worth benefit, direct benefit were transferred through DBT in last 11 years, starting from 2014 to 2025. life. And counting at 1 lakh every minute would take around 833 years to complete the amount that has been that has been transferred through the DBT. We are talking about the PM Kisan. Let's look into the basic aspect. Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi objective is to provide financial support for crop inputs. It was launched on 24th February 2019, and it is under the Ministry of Agriculture and Farmers Welfare, and it is a central sector scheme, means 100% contribution is coming from the central government itself. Also, eligibility criteria to get the benefits of PM Kisan is that all land holding farmers are eligible to get the benefits of the PM Kisan. Earlier, it was only for the small and marginal farmers, but now all the land owning farmers can get the benefits. Income support is being provided. That this is an income support measure that they can get the support with the 6,000 per year, and that will be provided in 3 equal installments. The definition of family for getting the benefits is husband, wife, and minor children. The beneficiary identification is being done by the states and union territory government. Also, direct transfer can happen in the bank accounts of the person. Also, there are certain exclusion categories that the people not to be eligible for benefit under the scheme. All institutional landholders that are there, the farmer families in which one or more of its members belong to the following categories. For example, former and present holders of constitutional posts, former or present ministers, MPs, MLAs, mayors or chairpersons of district panchayats, all serving or retired employees of central and state government, central or state public sector enterprises and autonomous institutions under government, as well as the regular employees of the local bodies. All they are excluded. Then all retired pensioners whose monthly pension is 10,000 or more, excluding class 4 or group D employees. All person who paid income tax in last assessment year, all these are not eligible. Then professionals like doctor, engineers, lawyers, CAs, architects registered with the professional bodies, all they are excluded from getting the benefits of the PM Kisan, that is Pradhan Mantri Kisan Samman Nidhi Yojana. Our next topic is venture capitalists, and this is related to GS paper 3 capital market, and this has appeared in today's The Indian Express page number 12. So the venture capitalists or the investors, they are being more selective about where they will be deploying their capital. This is what has been said in today's newspaper, that consistently the total funding that they are providing, that was consistently very high in year 2022, but now they are in a wait and watch mode. First of all, they are getting a clarity about the product that will be made by the startup, and accordingly they will be deploying their capital. So let's suppose there is a person who came with an idea. Okay. So in the initial phase itself, whatever the capital that will be provided by the near and dear ones of that person who is coming with the idea, who is taking that risk of starting a business, or who is having a vision. So the near and dear ones, or the people at the initial stage who are investing or giving capital, these are called as the angel investors, and they actually contribute, or they invest based on the personal wealth, that whatever the wealth that they have accumulated, they will be giving to this A person or any XYZ startup. Also, this is the very early stages of the investment. Even the person hasn't came with the minimum viable product. Also, it is generally smaller, in tens or hundreds of thousands. They generally ask for a very smaller equity stake, and this varies. Involvement can vary from hands-on or passive in nature. There is no as such requirement of being the participant in the day-to-day business activities. The exit strategy, that how these people can sell their stakes or ownership or shares in the startup where they have invested. So that exit strategy is less formalized, and often that follow the venture capitalist lead. The venture capitalists, they are pooling funds from institutional investors, and then they are investing in various early age companies or startups, etc. But that startup should come with the minimum viable product. What does that mean? That means that they have already established themselves. They have shown the world that this is the product that we will be coming with. They have started generating some form of revenue, etc. So the risk is high, but comparatively less at this stage. The investment is coming in early to mid stage. Investment size is typically large, often in millions. All the startups which are there in India has got some or other form of the venture capitalist funding in different phases of their company. Equity stake, they often ask for very large equity stake. Also, involvement is generally very high. For example, they ask for the seats in the board of directors or the company, and they also takes active participation in the decision making with regard to the company. Also, there are clearly defined goals with regard to the exit strategy. For example, whether they will be exiting with the help of initial public offering or IPO, acquisition, etc. All that is clearly defined, and accordingly they will exit. The benefits of venture capital is that it can provide access to capital, it can provide expertise and guidance to the startups, because these are the people who do have a huge experience in investing in these new age startup or companies. Then also there is the benefit of the risk sharing, that it will not be the complete risk of the startup owner or the promoters of the company. Rather, the venture capitalists will also be taking some form of risk. Also, this can provide accelerated growth, because the company will get the capital and then they can expand, they can grow. Also, it provides validation and credibility. It also provides access to networks and partnerships. That, for example, it can provide networks with various e-commerce companies company. It can also provide networking to several other wholesalers, etc. That can significantly improve the overall growth of the company. Then also there is a related term, alternative investment fund, from where there was a question that was asked in Prelims 2025. So these alternative investment fund are the private pooled investment vehicle that collect fund from the sophisticated investors. These are the investors who do have a greater experience on investing in any one sector or the type of company. And this include both Indian and foreign investors. It does not include funds that are covered under Indian market regulator, SEBI's mutual fund regulator, or any other regulators such as IRDA, PFRDA, etc. There are three categories. For example, investment in startups, which is the early stage, small and micro enterprises, projects which are socio-economically viable. For example, venture capital fund, infrastructure fund, angel fund, and social venture fund. Then category 2, that is the investment in equity and debt securities. For example, private equity fund, debt fund, funds of fund. Category 3, which is the investment aimed at short-term return achieved by employing complex trading strategies. For example, hedge fund, private investment in public equity fund or PIPE. All these are the alternative investment fund categories. And this was the question of 2025 with reference to investment. Consider the following statements. How many of ever are treated as alternative investment fund? Bonds, no. Stocks, no. Hedge funds, yes. Venture capitalists, yes. So only 2B was the correct answer of this particular question. Our next topic is futures and options. This is again related to GS paper 3 capital market, and this has appeared in today's The Indian Express, page number 12. So futures and options are kind of derivatives which are deriving its value from some underlying asset. So derivative is a financial contract whose value is deriving from an underlying asset. For example, generally people say, Ki, I get happiness by seeing you smiling. So the happiness of the person is getting derived from the smile of other person. So this happiness is a kind of derivative which is deriving its value from the smile of other person. Okay? And these derivatives is based on the expected future price of that asset, that what can be the future price, whether it will increase or decrease. It does not usually involve ownership of the underlying assets because it is just deriving its value. It is not owning that particular asset. The underlying assets under this can be the shares of the company, stock indices such as Nifty 50, commodities such as gold and crude oil, currencies such as US dollar or Indian rupees, interest rates and bonds. All that can be the underlying assets whose value will be derived based on this derivatives. The purpose of this derivative is to do hedging, to reduce the price risk that they are speculating, price discovery through the future price expectation that whether there will be demand or more supply of that particular asset, speculation to earn profit from the price movements. There are some of the sophisticated investors who do have the experience in this kind of trading, so they earn profit also. Arbitrage to move the price difference across market. Arbitrage means that if there is a discrepancy in two different markets with regard to the prices, so I can take that benefit. For example, I can buy in NSE and I can sell in BSE if there is a price difference in both the markets. So whatever the difference that will be there, that will be my profit. There are two major types: futures and options. Futures contract, that is the legally binding agreement to buy or sell an asset at a fixed price on a future date. Both buyers and sellers are obligated to execute the contract. Then you have the major features of future contracts is that it is standardized and exchange traded. It requires margin deposit, also daily settlement through mark to market. There can be two positions, either it can be the long and short. The risk and returns associated with this is that gains and losses are unlimited and profit and loss are realized daily. And then options contract, a contract giving the buyer right but not the obligation to buy or sell an asset at a specified price. Only the seller is obligated if the buyer exercises the option. Okay. The types of this options contract is the call option that gives a right to buy, put option that gives a right to sell. The major features of this options contract is that the buyer pays a premium and then buyer has the limited risk. Seller earns premium but bears the higher risk. The risk and return associated with this is that buyer's maximum loss is limited to premium. The seller may face large or unlimited losses. In India, they all are regulated by the Security and Exchange Board of India, which is the regulator of Indian capital market. Also, this is traded mainly on National Stock Exchange and Bombay Stock Exchange, which are the exchanges in India. Our next topic is Enforcement Directorate, and this is related to your prelims, current events of national and international importance, and this has appeared in today's The Indian Express, page number 8. So this Enforcement Directorate is a domestic law enforcement and economic intelligence agency. This enforces the economic laws and combats the financial crimes in India. For example, the people who are involved in money laundering, etc. ED takes action against them. Originally, it was set up as an enforcement unit in 1956, and that was to look up to the Foreign Exchange Regulation Act violations. And this was renamed as Enforcement Directorate in 1957. The nodal ministry of this ED, that is one of the most important information that you must remember, because a lot of you generally believe that ED comes under Ministry of Home Affairs. That is incorrect. It comes under Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance. You people tell me in the comment box that CBI comes under which ministry. Then the key acts that are enforced, for example, the Foreign Exchange Management Act, FEMA 1999, Prevention of Money Laundering Act PMLA 2002, Fugitive Economic Offenders Act of 2018. All these acts are enforced by Enforcement Directorate. Any violation or any crime covered under these acts can lead to arrest by the ED. Also, Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002 that came. The objective of that is to prevent and control the money laundering, that we are concealing the real identity of the money that we have got. Also, attach and confiscate proceeds of crime, address matters connected to money laundering. The section 3 that actually defines the various kind of offenses. For example, direct or indirect involvement in handling the proceeds of crime and projecting them as untainted property. The major amendments that were done in 2009 and 2012, and that was done via Finance Act of 2015, 18 and 19. The powers of Enforcement Directorate that is provided under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act is that sections 48 and 49 that provides for investigation powers. Section 50 subclause 2 can summon any person for evidence or records. Section 50 subclause 3 that provides for summoned person must appear and provide truthful statements. Also, it provides power to attach and confiscate property. Supreme Court in 2022 also said that it upholds the powers of the Enforcement Directorate under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act. Again, one of the important features is that burden of proof lies on the person who is arrested under the Prevention of Money Laundering Act 2002. It also clarified ED officers are not police officers, and that actually emphasized the rule of law and procedural safeguards that should be taken into account, because police is a state subject. And this is the question that was again asked in 2025, that Directorate of Enforcement, that some of its function is that it enforced the Fugitive Economic Offenders Act of 2018. It comes under Internal Security Division 1 of Ministry of Home Affairs. That was incorrect. And Directorate of Revenue Intelligence, it enforces the provisions of the Customs Act 1962, Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance. That is correct. Directorate General of Systems and Data Management, carrying out big data analytics to assist tax officers for better policy and nabbing tax evaders, Department of Revenue, Ministry of Finance. Both these options were correct, and the first option was incorrect. This is what I keep on saying to the student, that this is not only test of your bookish knowledge, rather it is the test that whether you are observing your surroundings or not. Because ED probably comes in news every week, or within 2-3 days you will always hear the ED. But still, if you are a person who is ignorant, who is negligent, who is not focusing on the basic information about the ED, then probably you will face difficulty in the prelims examination. UPSC is focusing on the most important core information or the basic information. Okay? So we always have to ensure that whatever the basic details are there, first of all we should focus on that, because if we will dig much deeper into the technical details, chances are that we may miss the basic information. For example, there was a question that was asked that which of the following countries actually borders the Ukraine, and that was asked in 2023. Okay, and especially this was in the backdrop of Russia-Ukraine war. People start digging much deeper into the politics, religion, society, economy of Ukraine, but still people were not focusing on the basic detail, that is the bordering countries of the Ukraine. So please don't do that. Whatever the major themes and topics that are in news in last few months, that is in news in last 1 year, please focus on the basic and core information related to that. You will be rewarded in the actual examination. So these two options were correct. First option was incorrect. Correct answer was B, only 2 for this particular question of prelims 2025. That is all from today's analyst. Thank you very much. All the very best. Keep studying.